Welcome to the Law Simplified's SQE Prep for Business Practice. I'm your instructor, Shaveen Bandardanayaka. This comprehensive program was designed to help you ace your solicitor's qualifying examinations. I hope you enjoy this course, but without much further ado, let's begin.
Now, by and large, when you think about company law, or when you think about the formation of an enterprise, a business, essentially the split that you have to think about when you are conducting business is whether your entity, whether the business that you are conducting effectively amounts to something which is incorporated or unincorporated. The reason in the context of our discussion why this is important is because in terms of whether you are incorporated or unincorporated, liability will shift between either the individual or the company. Now, I'll try to illustrate this from examples. Yeah. Now, if we take, for example, a fruit vendor doing business on the side of a road somewhere, he has his business, he has his suppliers who provides him with the fruits, he has the customers that come and buy from him. But apart from that, on his own, since he's doing his business, you could consider him to be a sole trader. He's a one-man army dealing on his own. Now, this is completely possible. There is very limited formalities that he has to fill. He's working on his own. While it is easy and it's quite straightforward, the unfortunate outcome of this is where there might be liability in terms of his business, he has to bear it on his own. Because from the perspective of the law, there is nothing as his business being separate from himself. It is considered as the same instance, the same person. As a result, if he is ever to face liability due to something that has happened at his stall, let's say, for example, someone comes to buy fruits, there is the fruits are held in one of these cantilevered sort of baskets overhead. Something gives way due to it not being fixed properly. The entire basket falls on someone, injuring that person. He is going to sue this fruit vendor. Now, since there is no company or no organization, he is being sued personally. So being sued personally, if you recall from our little bit in terms of the end of money judgments or rather enforcement of money judgments in dispute resolution, if he is incapable of paying things off, because he's a sole trader, it opens up the liability to his personal assets. Whoever is suing him can go after his personal assets and anything that is related personally to him. Because we will look later, there is no veil that's protecting him from his business. The same can be said about a partnership, which is another form of an unincorporated association or a business. The difference here is liability, if at all, would be split. So imagine in equal measure, both of you are running this fruit stall. I come to buy some apples. The whole thing collapses on me. The liability will be personal for both of you, but split evenly. That's the only difference. Now, our discussion, by and large, will focus on the converse of this, which is mostly incorporated associations or businesses. This is when a legal personality separate to the individual or individuals are formed. So your business and who is running the business are essentially two different entities. And the business itself, let's say the Law Simplified, can sue and be sued on its own, irrespective of Shaveen Bandardanayaka. Now, these can be formed in a multitude of ways. Some of these we will look at in detail later. Others we will drop because it's not part of your examinable content. But some of the types of incorporated businesses that you might have heard of are things like private limited companies, public limited companies, and on smaller occasions, limited liability partnerships. The most pertinent, though, is that when it comes to an incorporated body, they are regulated by what is considered the Bible of company law and business law in general, the Companies Act of 2006. Quite a hefty piece of legislation that runs to about 1,700 sections in the UK. It is in itself a phone book, if you really look at it. It's pretty hefty and pretty big. Are we good so far? Questions?
So for the sole trader,
Yes.
if he is to be sued, he would be sued personally.
Yeah.
In case of partnership, because there would be more than one people,
Correct.
at least two.
Yeah.
So they would be kind of sued jointly. Is that how we call it?
Yeah. Generally they'll be sued jointly, and by default it is equal measure. But depending on the type of partnership you have, you might have circumstances where the liability is split in disproportionate manners. So you might have, let's say, for example, governing partners that have a larger stake than more junior partners. Take it from the context of a law firm, for example. You'll have different stakes and different, I don't want to say shares as such, because that will come in later when we talk about incorporated private limited companies. But essentially, it's a multiplication of sole trader, but split evenly or in disproportionate measures between the partners. That too is controlled or looked at by virtue of a particular piece of legislation, which is the Partnership Act of 1890. That's a fairly old statute, and we will look at issues that have come up because of that when we look at partnerships in particular later on.
Let's see.
All good? Questions?
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Maybe I was just thinking about the liability for the company that is incorporated.
Correct.
Because in sole trader and partnership that the liability is split, but a sole trader has unlimited liability, correct?
That's right.
For
partnership doesn't have limited liability. Partnership, the liability is just split between the partners. Whether it is in equal proportion or in disproportionate amounts is based on the arrangement that the partnership has.
But it could still be unlimited, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, think of it as sole trader.
And the business can be sued, as you said.
Yes, correct.
Not the person. So how does it?
Limited liability partnerships, not in general partnerships of unincorporated associations. So remember, this is a unicorn situation, right? Limited liability partnerships. We don't focus on it as much, but that's another aspect of it. So let me try to put this into a bit of context, right? When you incorporate your business, you are creating a person. That's what you're doing. You're putting someone before you. So that's why we refer to this as a legal personality. So now, for instance, let's take my business. Let's take the Law Simplified. So when it's a Law Simplified, now this studio, yeah. So when I have this studio, so I was running the Law Simplified. So when I purchase computers, when I purchase like sofas, or like when I get these things fixed, they are made and invoiced to the Law Simplified, not to Shavin Bandarnaik.
So you expense those costs as part of your organization.
Which means if I go, let's say if something happens and I owe liability to someone, it's not Shavin Bandarnaik that owes liability. It is the Law Simplified that owes liability. Now, let's say in this studio, the only thing that is in my name is, let's say, this phone. Okay. This phone is in my name. Okay. So now I owe liability to someone for something, for services rendered that were subpar, and a person has gone and lost the case or something. Now he comes after not me, because the services were rendered by me as an individual, but through the banner of Law Simplified. So it will be John Doe versus the Law Simplified. Now, let's say I have zero capital to pay damages. I don't have any money. So if I don't have any money, what will happen? There'll be seizure. Let's take it from enforcement of money judgment, like we spoke of in dispute resolution. So I have no money. So what has to happen? There has to be an enforcement officer that has a court order to come and take stuff. Now, when they take stuff, they can essentially seize, by and large, anything that is in the name of, within reason, things which are in the name of the Law Simplified. So the computers, the whatever, but not my phone. Because the phone is in Shaveen Bandaranaike's name, not the Law Simplified.
Got it.
So that is what happens when you incorporate. That's why we say limited liability. It is limited to the assets owned by the legal personality. Whereas in a sole trader, you don't have that. Because whatever you own is susceptible to it. The concept in company law that we refer to this it's called the Veil of Incorporation. That's VEIL. Veil as in like the wedding veil, I believe. So essentially the idea is that when you incorporate, there is an entity that is in front of you. No one knows who the persons behind are. No one can touch the persons who are behind, subject to a few exceptions in terms of fraud and things like that. Again, those are outside of the scope of this subject, right? I'm trying to stay in line as much as possible, but also explain certain company law aspects. But you would now get what I meant earlier, right? Like you have to say the company law bit in order to, it's a chicken or the egg sort of. I can't talk procedure without talking law also, for this at least.